Welcome to the Definitive UFO News Show. I'm your host, Mr. Rob G. We're going to go ahead and look more into these drones. The drone situation still is unsolved, unresolved as of today. And it's kind of troubling when you think about it, right? Because, if there's an answer, the answer should be out by now, you would think. We did on last show, we went over why it made sense, why it was not an adversarial threat. That's been backed up by statements from uh, the government. The government has come out and said just as much a few different times. They have been having a lot of closed door hearings though lately, which is kind of concerning because you have to ask yourself why all the hearings, why all the meetings here, classified closed door meetings, if they're just drones, like everyone is trying to sit here and say, they're just aircraft, they're just drones, there's nothing else to it. There's nothing nefarious going on here, is what we keep hearing. We're going to go ahead and just take a look at the latest that has been going on here with these drones in quotation marks, because if you ask me, I think it's more than that. I think it's more than drones. I think a part of this is drones, but I really feel like a part of this is the other thing that we talked about, right? Which is the other thing that we don't want to lean fully into, but looking at the evidence and kind of going down the line, there are a lot of things that point to maybe there is something very anomalous going on here, and I'll be the one to say it, right? I don't want to jump into the fire and without having vetted other things or looked at other options to say that this is guaranteed something anomalous. But there are a lot of things that lean into it, and I think what we're seeing is a little bit of both. We have situations where we are seeing things that look like solid, potentially man-made objects. I'd say probably 80-20 uh, anomalous versus something man-made that we're seeing in the sky. It was more like 90-10 now. And I got to tell you this has been seen in a lot of different places. There was a streamer, and I don't know if I can play his stream, and I think I should, because I think it gives context. I'll at least play a part of it. But there was a streamer who was he's a food vlogger, and during his stream, something something popped up. One of these things popped up, and I think I have the link here. If I could bring the link up, I definitely want to make it. I definitely want to show it here. So let me see. Okay, all right. We'll go ahead and I'll have to come back to that here. We'll go ahead and jump right into what we have, and looking at the screen here. All right. So we do have a call in line. We may do a call in just to see how people are feeling about the situation. I have everything set up here. So if we do that towards the end of this show, which will be not, this show will be short, not as long as the last show. Last show, we had to really do a deep dive and bring everybody up to speed on where we were at. But this one won't be as long. And the call in number, if we do this later, will be 856-843-3444, or that's 856 the dig. And if you're calling from outside the United States, that'll be 001-856-843-3444 or 001-856 the dig. So jumping right on into it, we do have memberships, and actually we're broadcasting from the Social Dig channel, which is simultaneously broadcasting on our Spaced Out Radio channel as well. So you definitely, wherever you're joining us from, whether it's on Spaced Out Radio's channel or over here on the Social Dig, either way, welcome to the show, and we do appreciate you guys coming on in. And if you wouldn't mind, if you're watching from SOR, come to the Social Dig and hit subscribe. If you're watching on Social Dig, go over to SOR, hit subscribe. We are all family, and we're showing the love here today. So we jump right into the show. It's Drone Watch, right? Are some of these drones not from Earth? Let's just get to the point here. Let's get to it. Are some of these drones not from Earth? There's a lot of things. I let this play out. like I said, we are pretty far into this thing. Yeah, I've had different perspectives. I've sat down and I've let the thing play out. I've looked at the evidence that was out there, and like I said in the beginning, I did not want to lean initially into this as just anomalous, aliens showing up here on Earth in this moment, but there are too many things that are now leaving us without any other choice but to look at that, right? And I think that's an important thing. Also, because of the awkward silence, as we talked about in the other show, there's been a lot of things that have popped up as far as conspiracy theories. Now, these are the things that, you can't technically blame people for coming up with conspiracy theories, but also you want to make sure that those get dispelled pretty much right away, especially when they're ones that could, send the public into an uproar or, as far as instilling fear into the general public. And I was looking at some of those and I keep hearing them pop up every now and then, but I'm glad that they've been addressed and talked to as far as them not being a thing. And just so you know, today marks 1 month since the drones began showing up in New Jersey. Now, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Because a month is a very long time for something to happen and there be no explanation as to why, right? 1 full month. That's 1/12 of a year. 1/12 of a year we have sat here with drone incursion, well, drone. I'm going to say objects incurring on military installations, hanging out over neighborhoods, and it appears that this issue is spreading across the world. Now, a couple things to look at. There has been Congress members, Senate members as well, who have talked about these things coming in from the ocean. Right, those are things we're going to also address again on this episode because I think that's key. When we fully have crossed out adversaries as being an option here, then why would you have objects coming in from the sea? What sense does that make when adversaries are not the cause? And then our own military, right? Our own military has been ruled out by the military themselves. They've ruled themselves out as being an option. And then it just doesn't make sense, as we talked about last episode, for the military to be the cause of this, because if these would be black projects being shown or put on display or tested, as some theories have stated, it just wouldn't make sense that they would come out every single day for a month, right? If this is something secret, top secret, because it'd be on display every single day for the world to see. You could set your watch by the time they would come out, pull up a chair, get some popcorn, and watch black projects every single night. How much sense does that make, right? Makes none at all. So when they say it's not government, when the government comes out and says that, there's obviously truth there, right? So we could see in this instance, when the government is saying not adversarial and then not military, we can see that they're telling the truth about that because logic takes you down the same path and gets you to that same conclusion. So you have, as we showed last show, you had those options. You also have an option for citizens, private entities, commercial drone operators, right? And so we kind of ruled those out because, as you saw on November 30th, there was a Chinese national who flew a 2-pound drone above Vandenberg Space Force Center, and the drone detection system caught that drone. That drone went up to 8,000 feet, over a mile above the base. The drone detection system detected that drone, and by the time it landed in the Chinese national had tucked it away, the officials were on the scene to question him right there. So you got to know that if this was related to anyone with the stick operating a drone, whether that's private, citizen, or even commercial, They by the time that thing landed in day one, let's just say week one, and that's just a long shot. They would have definitely been approached and talked to by officials, and this thing would be over. So last episode we ruled all those things out, right? And it only leaves us with one anomalous thing, which would be potentially the UFO issue that we've been already dealing with for the last 90 years, may be tied into what's going on here, right? One of the theories that we popped out and posed was that we may be having an uptick in anomalous activity, which has prompted some outlets to put drones up to mitigate that. That's what makes sense to me, more sense than all of this being anomalous. So I can see a world where, or a situation where, the anomalous things have shown up, and we've seen examples of those, and we'll show those later in the show. And then to mitigate that, they put up actual drones to mitigate the anomalous activity that's up there. Makes sense, and fits the narrative and fits what it is we're seeing, based on reports, because we're seeing some things that look like light balls, and then we're seeing some things that look like actual, equipment, physical drone equipment. So this narrative fits exactly what it is that we're seeing up there, and we'll kind of dive more into it. But very important to know that today marks the first full month, every day since these drones have started, which I think is mind blowing, truthfully. As we get into it, and like I said, the non-answer, even though they go into these meetings and come out with barely any new information, the silence is deafening, and it leaves a void for conspiracy theorists to kind of get up and say things that don't make sense. And that one of the biggest things that had come up that we're going to go ahead and take a look at here. Um, the government admits not adversarial, not our militaries. We still see these objects nightly. Non-answers open up the door for these conspiracies, and we're going to go ahead and look at what came up here. This was what I saw yesterday, or actually maybe a couple days ago, as someone was floating the idea to me that these were nuclear related, that these objects, these craft that we're seeing, were up there looking for nuclear weapons, that a nuke that had been lost or smuggled in, a suitcase nuke, and that these drones were flying low to detect radiation levels or something along those lines. Now, there was nothing that substantiated that story. There was nothing that I could see that would back that up. But you had a lot of people out there saying this and pushing this narrative, even though they didn't have information to back it up. They just heard it somewhere. They heard it on social media. So we go back and find this guy right here, who seems like he might have been the origin of where that story came from. And I won't really play his video because he says he's not trying to create a conspiracy theory during the video, but he literally is, as he does this, in kind of pushing the line that this is the reason that they have to be up there. They have to be up there because they're sniffing something out. Okay. So he goes online with this theory on TikTok. I'm not sure how many views he gets over there. I'm sure a lot, but it was picked up by this person, Mila Joy, who reposted this on X. And on X alone, at the time that I snatched this, it was at 8.7 million views, right? So this guy goes online, puts out a conspiracy theory stating these drones could be looking for a missing nuke. Over 8 million people view that. And then that's on, what is this, December 14th? So 4 days ago. Then this tweet gets picked up by who? Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan finds this tweet and says, this is the first video about these drones that has gotten me genuinely concerned. Now, not saying that he's backing this theory, but because he's reposted it, then this post gets an additional 22 million views. So we're talking 30 million views that we know of for a theory that has no basis in anything, right? 30 million views, and then this is the new narrative. So Joe Rogan finds this conspiracy theory interesting, reposted on X, gets an additional 20 million views, and then here we are. Every YouTube channel out there has someone in their chat talking about uh these drones are up there looking for nukes. Now, if that isn't misdirection or spreading propaganda, then I don't know what is. And that's why I say you got to vet your information. Sit back for a minute. All right. Sit back for a minute, see what comes out. Then, if there's a basis behind it, then let's go ahead and talk about it. But this was a nothing burger to start with. You're going to get the whole nation, instill fear in the whole nation, thinking that there's some sort of nuke on the loose in the United States. That is irresponsible and crazy. Various outlets and individuals irresponsibly run with that conspiracy theory without the evidence to substantiate the claims. And I think that is a sad state of affair. But to be fair, they wouldn't be able to do that if the government isn't sitting there being mum's the word, right? So I think that's a big part of it. So I can't really, blame idle minds, right? Because essentially that's exactly what it is. But we can kind of put that to bed. Officially, these objects are not searching for rogue lost nukes. They're not. These objects have nothing to do with that. So let's put that to bed. Let's put that to bed and let's move on. All right. So there was a statement released from the Department Homeland Security, FBI, FAA, and DOD on drone spottings. Said we assessed that the sightings today include a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, and law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, and stars mistakenly reported as drones. We have not identified anything anomalous and do not assess the activity to date to present a national security or public safety risk. Okay, so that got out there, and a lot of people looked at that and said BS, right? This is a BS statement, but I will say, I was watching YouTube and I did see that Stephen Greenstreet from the Post, or actually, yes, from the New York Post in the basement office, challenged some of the drone claims with help from Mick West. So Mick West teamed up with Stephen Greenstreet, and normally it's just a debunk campaign when it comes to those two. But I will say they definitely helped in this time, and I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out, and from an open-minded perspective, I want to accept this data that they brought to the table, because I think in this moment, it's actually thoughtful and it's helpful as well. So to kind of go over what it is that they uncovered, Stephen Greenstreet was able to identify some of the misidentified craft. And I think that's very important because, when you look up, just because something has blinking lights, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a drone. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's related to this. As we talked about before, the more time that passes, the more chances you have of a third party, just a random person saying, hey, I want to put my drone up, and goes and puts their drone up. And then now their drone is, part of this story. I'll take you to a moment that I had before, when I did the last show about this. As I was coming into the studio, to the office to do the show, right down the street, before I walked in the door, I looked to the left, and there's a drone in the sky, right in the middle of this craze. And so I could have immediately looked at that and said, I saw one of these drones, but I said, let me sit on this, because likely it's a person that just decided to put a drone up. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. So just being responsible in this moment that we're in, in the reporting of what it is that we see. Not everything that's up there is going to be related to this situation, and I have to applaud Stephen Greenstreet and Mick West for stepping out and kind of putting that out there. Right? We need skeptics in this conversation. Open-minded skeptics, I love and accept, because steel sharpens steel, and I think that they're just as important to the conversation than we are. Let's figure it. If we're really trying to figure this out, you got to have both sides of the conversation. So they went down and they picked out this photo right here, which was one of the main drones they show, or drones, which I guess isn't a drone at this point, on a lot of the broadcasts, right? I think I even used this on a thumbnail before it was solved. And so that's why I can appreciate that, because they did some footwork on this in order to determine this. And you can obviously take what they've done and go process it. I recommend that you go watch the video as well, where Greenstreet breaks this down. But it ends up going back to this guy right here. So this right here, what we see here, apparently is this plane right here, right? And I guess this is before people were using Flight Tracker to be able to determine if what they were seeing in the sky was something that's registered with the FAA or not, right? So I think that the point of this, he ended up contacting this guy. The guy confirmed after watching the video that this was his plane passing through the area. And another thing that happened, which I thought was kind of embarrassing, but a learnable moment, is they were able to find the former governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, who had stepped out and shown some footage of what he thought was drones, and ended up being a star system. These were the pictures of what he said were drones, and it ended up being a constellation. And that's just, you know, for him, I'm sure it's embarrassing, but it's a learnable moment for everyone else. That when you're looking up there, just be a little apprehensive. Just kind of hold for a moment before you rush to judgment on what it is you're seeing, because what this has done, and the realization of hey, not everything up there is gonna be in this drone category, helps out, because it takes a lot of the extra stuff out that we really don't need to be focused on. So now we can X out a lot of the footage that has been disproven, and focus on the stuff that really hasn't been explained, right? So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And as time goes on, we'll find that more and more citizens are simply putting up their own drones, which is what we talked about in the last episode. We also know the stars are up there too. They're up there all the time. A lot of people mistake Venus, for whatever reason, mistake Venus for UAP. I don't get it. I go out there and I look at Venus all the time, and I've never considered Venus to be anything but Venus. But it's up to us to use the appropriate tools before calling something anomalous. I think that's the responsible thing to do. And since this is a issue that is continuing, it isn't over, it's still happening. So you have a chance to kind of recalibrate your approach to what you report and what you capture here, right? This is a chance, like learning on the job, essentially, is what we're doing here. So that's good. I'm glad that they did that. So shout out to Greenstreet and Mick West for that. So the recommendation is, and I already do this, I use the Flight Tracker app, and I also use SkyMap, but using Flight Tracker and apps like SkyMap are a necessity in this moment, especially, and going forward. Technically, if in any other sighting that you have, you're going to want to use these two tools, period. So Flight Tracker and apps like SkyMap are a necessity while determining what's normal air traffic versus anomalies. And it's just a responsible thing to do. I really don't think that there's anything else to be said about that. It's just go ahead and download it on your phone. It's a free app, Flight Tracker. I think the one I use is Flight Tracker 24. And then there's also SkyMap. and you hold the sky map, it comes up on your phone. You just hold it up to that part of the sky where you're thinking you're like those stars that were shown. And if he thought those were drones, if he had sky map, he took his phone and placed it on that part of the sky, would have shown him that it was a constellation. Very cool tool, just to have. So, with that being said, we're going to keep moving this on. President-elect Trump uh, has been vocal lately as well. He has come out and said that they know what this is. The government knows what this is. The White House knows what this is, and they should just come out and say it. Now, this is what Trump is saying. Trump says the White House knows exactly what's going on and should be straight with the people. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Trump states no comment when he was asked by a reporter if he had been briefed on the situation, which incoming presidents are usually briefed on everything the sitting president is briefed on. But I've heard also recently that he hasn't been briefed on this. So it may just be him talking. So it's a little unclear right there on if he has the details that they're briefing the president with currently, Joe Biden. But the thing with that is that I think we can agree on that sentiment that they do know what's going on. They know for sure whether these things are anomalous. They know if which I think we've already erased or crossed out the options for man-made, but if they ever were man-made, they would know for sure where those man-made things were coming from. So there's no doubt that the government knows exactly what's going on here, which is why when they have these closed door meetings, so they had one yesterday, and I was going to take a step back for a moment because there's no sense in doing a show the day they have a closed door meeting, and then in that meeting they say something revolutionary, or they end up saying something that changes the direction of this conversation. So I decided to wait until today to see if any new talk came out of that meeting, and essentially there was not a lot. And actually, we're going to go ahead in a moment and take a look at some of the things that they said, uh but let's keep going. If Trump insists that the current administration should be straight with the public, even after Trump was potentially or obviously briefed, then one would assume that it isn't something that's classified. That would be the thought process, right? If he was briefed, Trump, then if he's saying that the current administration should come out and say what it is, then you would assume that the issue that they have exposed is not a classified issue, right? So, if he was briefed, then maybe that's him kind of saying, it is something you could say to the public. And if that's the case, then yeah, they definitely should come out and say whatever it is, right? Because if that's the case, then what information could the government be withholding? What is it? I think we can pretty much point to what it is. When you do process of elimination, you use logic to kind of break these things down and get to where, what are you really left with? And you're not left with much. You're only left with things like things that aren't from here. You've crossed out everything related to man. Now, unless AI has advanced and now AI is taking over drones and automating drones, that'd be the only left field option, which we know that they're not even at that case, though they will be one day. So to be concerned about that, but we know that's not at play here. So what are we really looking at, right? But anyway, they go ahead and they have the classified meeting on drones. And you got to ask yourself, because if in the news they're sitting there saying, oh, this is there's nothing nefarious here. It's not adversarial, it's not military. So then you'd ask yourself, why are they having these classified meetings? And what are they doing or saying in these classified meetings? right? That's got to be the question. So if this is simply civilian and commercial craft and misidentification, right, which is another thing, which we have proven that is some of the actually true part of this is exactly what they said there, then why have the closed door meetings? Why not have the conversation that you're having in there with the public? Well, we had a clip here of some of the attendees of this meeting that took place yesterday. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at what it was that they said took place in the or what they could divulge to the public. So here we go.
Just moments after exiting a 3-hour closed door briefing.
No, we have no idea who owns these drones. We spent a lot of time in this hearing asking the question in every way imaginable as to whether or not any of these sightings in New Jersey, Connecticut, anywhere they're being cited, are federal government operations. And they are not. We were assured, and we asked this question over and over and over again. They are not federal government operations to sniff radiation, gas, recovery, anything else.
There's no evidence that there's anything nefarious going on.
To date, they haven't found anything that would indicate that there's foreign influence, foreign actors, or even little green men who are working on the American people.
Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois, who was also in that closed-door briefing. Always good to see you. So, okay, no little green men. We'll just sort of let that state as a fact. But beyond that, would your bottom line be stop worrying?
No, not necessarily. So there were about 5,000 reported incidents of these lights in the sky that were basically processed by the FBI, CIA, DHS, and other agencies. And they've now determined about 4,900 of them can be explained as, commercial drones, amateur drones, manned aircraft, and the like. They're still tracking down what's going on with those other 100 incidents. But my main point that I took away was I think they should provide more of this information faster to the public, especially if they know that something is a manned aircraft, for instance, providing information to the public about, okay, this is the flight tracker data. This is how you know that this is a civilian aircraft and so forth. The second takeaway that I had was that there are inadequacies, there are holes in our law with regard to providing authorities to local law enforcement as well as other agencies in detecting and potentially defeating drones or taking them down in a safe manner. There's also a lack of authorities for them to do these things, a lack of rules and regulations. So these are things that we need to all work on.
Okay, there's a lot of questions I have after hearing what you had to say. Let me start with this one. Did you hear anything you wish you could say right now that you could tell your constituents, tell the American people that you can't for classified reasons?
One of the things that we talked about were foreign adversaries, foreign powers, and whether any of them were involved with any of this. And so I can't get into, for instance, details of why we know it wasn't, for instance, the Chinese Communist Party directing these drones in the Northeast. But a lot of it had to do with information that was already unclassified, and they needed to explain to us why they ruled X, Y, or Z reasons out for why those lights in the sky appeared.
So if somebody says to you, look, it's great that we know and feel confident about 4,900 of these, but 100 is not an insignificant number. So why can't we figure this out with everything that we have, all the technology we have, all the manpower that we have?
I think that's what we have to do right now. And I think there is more of a sense of urgency today than there was before, Chris, I think, with regard to tracking down what's going on with the remaining incidents. And by the way, I think more are probably being reported to these agencies as we speak. But it appears as of right now, I haven't seen any evidence of a foreign power or a terrorist organization or some kind of nefarious reason for the lights in the sky yet.
Now, that is awesome. I'm glad that we at least got that out of it. So in the classified meeting, they were at least able to let the attendees know why it wasn't, why they know it's not adversarial. So, and obviously there's sources and methods and ways that they check in on these adversaries or things that we can't know. I'm fine with that. But you can essentially take from what the gentleman just said right there that they were assured and told why it wasn't adversarial. So he's confident to be able to come forward and say it's not adversarial. There's no terrorist threat. So all those things that we're able to take off the list and kind of not even go back to, right? Because I think we've heard this enough. And first it was just hearsay. Somebody said this, they were told this, but they asked enough questions in this meeting, you could tell, because the other ladies brought up little green men, so it's obvious they asked about the alien potential here too. Now, getting into it, because we know, period, when it comes to whether alien information would be disclosed or not, we have enough experience in that field in ufology to be able to say that they wouldn't find out anything like that in a meeting like this. We know that. We know the alien issue is being handled by a different group, by a group that is in the shadows somewhere, wherever the retrieved material is. We know that group is not going to allow that to be said, even in this closed door classified meeting. So, but the adversarial piece, yes, you assume that would be able to be discussed in here. The military piece, to I guess a certain extent, would definitely be able to be talked about here. The terroristic issue would be able to be discussed in a meeting like this. So the only thing that you would not be able to really discuss or get an answer for in a meeting like this would be the anomalous option here, the impact of this being potentially not from here. Now, we know that as far as the statement that they make when they say this isn't creating a threat, or there is no, we don't see any threat, this is the same stance that we know they've taken when we've reported solely on UFOs and the things that have been detected that have been categorized as what they call UAP or UFOs. They'll say the same thing, that they do not pose a threat, or they do not seem to pose a threat. So we're taking the things historically that line up and align with each other. We're taking the information that we're getting out of these hearings, and what we're seeing is that just more and more, we're left with really the only option being left, and it being something anomalous. And this, I wanted to say it like this because normally the way someone on the outside of the UFO conversation will say, hey, this group jumps straight to UFOs. Like, the answer is UFOs. There is no critical thinking or responsible thinking in the getting to a conclusion. But that's what we're taking the time to do here and in this moment, as we're a month into this whole situation. If you remember back when this first happened, nobody was saying UFOs. I know in the UFO community, it was not said that this was UFOs. That was not the discussion. We looked at this as drones, and then just regular drones, and then, okay, why would there? And then this conversation is now taking us down a path where the normal things get crossed off the list, and then now we're only left with UFOs. So I just wanted to go ahead and point that out. But another thing that's weird and strange that we should be talking about and kind of pointing to in this conversation is this. So fire departments are being advised on how to approach a downed object by wearing hazmat suits, saying tell people don't approach the drone, if it is that, right? Because according to them, it's just normal stuff that we're seeing. So why would you tell your fire departments or advise your fire departments to approach one of these normal things that are up there with a hazmat suit? Why? Why would it be? I mean, fire departments deal with crashes all the time from the sky and on the ground. So they have their own protocol on how they should be approaching those things. Why would you advise them to go out of their protocol and to specifically wear hazmat suits? That's the question, right? That's one of the things that's sitting out there, like, not a threat, not adversarial, not military, not man-made, just misidentifications and in regular people's drones up there. So why would you tell your fire departments, or why would you tell the mayors and the governors to tell their fire departments that if they come across one of these things crashed, that they tell people to not approach it, which is understandable, but then have the fire department go in with hazmat suits? Okay, that's a thing that we're still going to have and keep on the board because I think that also gives us direction in this conversation, and we'll kind of get there, right? So I'm going to play something here in just a moment, but why the worry of something hazardous in relation to those objects, if not foreign nor military? Let's go ahead and take a look at a report on that right here, right now.
And now to the mystery drone sightings. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill meeting for a briefing today behind closed doors, hoping to settle concerns and pressing investigators for answers.
Got a lot of answers, but there's some unanswered questions. I think, quite frankly, the technology of drones has outpaced the law.
Federal authorities believe the unidentified objects are a combination of legally operated drones, planes, helicopters, and stars. In New Jersey, a new intelligence bulletin was released to fire departments across the state. It provides recommendations on how to respond to a downed drone. Our Jennifer Lee went to Mount Laurel to learn more about the safety recommendations created in collaboration with state police and the FBI.
I went in and screamed for my husband and said, we have drones outside of our house.
Valerie Brown points to the sky, showing us where she spotted several drones in her Mount Laurel neighborhood, even taking these pictures a few nights ago.
I would say that first night, I definitely saw at least 8. I find it to be scary. I was very freaked out. It's unnerving. I don't like it.
There's 2 right next to you.
Her neighbors saw them too. Deb Nat took this video with his son showing the red and green blinking lights, characteristic of a drone.
It was definitely not a plane. It was a drone. How does FAA not know? How does anybody not know? That's strange.
Over at Mount Laurel Fire, Deputy Chief Larry Fox shows us the intelligence bulletin released statewide from the New Jersey Division of Fire Safety. The first line says downed or landed drones should not be approached. It also says the area should initially be evacuated by 330 feet in all directions. Deputy Chief Fox says the precautionary measures refer to the Department of Transportation's Emergency Response Guidebook.
Our initial steps of securing the scene are very similar to how we would respond to a car crash or a tractor-trailer crash on the highway. We just don't know what the commodity is. So we're going to evaluate that scene from a distance, try and determine what it is that the vehicle may or may not be carrying.
The guidance says fire service members should utilize full personal protective equipment and request a hazmat team in the nearest bomb squad.
So we have some time to slow it down a little bit, evaluate the risk. We're going to do our best to make it safe for not only the responders and the investigators, but also for the general public.
Ultimately, Deputy Chief Fox says first responders are tasked with trying to be prepared as questions keep mounting.
Why are they here? Where are they coming from? And what are they doing? And are they dangerous?
It's also recommended that fire departments notify law enforcement and the FBI if they encounter a downed drone, as they will be the ones leading the investigation. In Mount Laurel, Jennifer Lee, Fox 29 News.
Okay. So you hear that, hazmat teams on the scene. And why would you do all that for something that's just irregular or something we understand? Now, since they claim that most are regular citizens flying regular drones and that these are all explainable, then what's the worry? What's the additional worry? It's because you don't understand what these things are. Like, you don't have a label to put on these things. But I think it goes a little bit further. I think they're worried about, I just feel like, and we don't know this for sure, this is just something to put on the board, but it makes sense if you're talking about a hazmat team, something biological potentially, or radiation. And why is radiation something to consider or look at, right? And I'd have to say, and this is a kind of a quick list I'm going to go down, but we know for a fact that most UFO cases or UFO encounters have often tied to being exposed to radiation, right? And generally the sites of where things have landed or crashed when it comes to UFOs often leave signs of radiation in the aftermath. So a few examples of that: the Cash Landrum incident. Now, some people think that's man-made, but I have my own thoughts on that. I think that it's very possible that was anomalous, but there was radiation in that case here. Betty Cash, Vicky Landrum, and Vicky's grandson Colby witnessed a diamond-shaped UFO emitting intense heat and light while driving. The craft hovered above the road, flanked by military helicopters. All three experienced severe physical symptoms resembling radiation sickness, including burns, nausea, hair loss, and skin damage. Medical evaluations suggested exposure to ionizing radiation. Lawsuits filed against the U.S. government claim the military was involved, that the U.S. military was involved in testing a radioactive craft, but were ultimately dismissed due to lack of evidence. You have the Kishtim UFO case in Kishtim, Russia, 1989. Locals report a small glowing UFO crash in a rural area near Kishtim. Upon recovery, witnesses claimed that the craft emitted radiation. Investigators who approached the site experienced radiation poisoning. Some reports suggest the incident was covered up due to proximity to the Mayak nuclear power plant. Then you have, let's see. Okay, you have the Rendlesham case. Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, England. We're talking about these RAF base incursions recently, but U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Bentwaters and Woodbridge reported encountering the glowing triangular craft in the forest. Readings taken at the landing site revealed anomalous radiation levels, 0.1 to 0.3 millirogans higher than the surrounding background radiation. This finding was documented by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, official memo, and corroborated by the British Ministry of Defense. Then you have the Brazilian UFO counters, the Colares encounters, right, from the 70s, where symptoms of chupa chupa attacks, beams of light, often showed symptoms consistent with mild radiation exposure, such as burns and fatigue. Let's see, we have the Delphos ring case, 1971. Glowing UFO left a circular ring of strange glowing material in a field. Analysis soil samples from the ring were analyzed and found to exhibit unusual chemical and radioactive properties, making plant regrowth in the area difficult for years. So those cases show that generally when you have an encounter with an anomalous object that comes from space or wherever it's coming from that is not man-made, that there is the risk of being affected by radiation. So they're telling these firefighters to go out there and call a hazmat team. They wouldn't do that if it was just a drone. You wouldn't call a hazmat team if it was just something regular, something that they're trying to position this as. But they're telling them on the back end, hey, just be prepared. If you see one of these crash, don't get close. Call hazmat in, and that would make sense if they were trying to prepare them for something like an anomalous object crashing, is what I'm saying. So we're not left with anything man-made when we're talking about options as far as what these could be. The only one that's really left is something anomalous, and then you give instructions that would really not align with any of the normal things that you're talking about, would only align with something anomalous. So then we have a lot of things that are pointing to a good portion of what we're seeing is related to something anomalous. But we're going to go ahead and we are going to keep this thing going, keep this thing moving as we lay down the groundwork for this here. So the next part of this that we're going to get into is just the visual that I showed on the last show, which is the amount of people, the amount of reportings for something anomalous in the sky from 2001 to 2020. When we look at this, and I want to try to bring it up full screen, because each one of those dots that you see on that screen represents someone reporting something anomalous in the sky. So look at the chances that if this many people reported something that couldn't be explained in the last 19 years, what is the likelihood that that's what we're dealing with now? Like, it's not something far-fetched. It's something that's actually pretty normal as far as seeing these things and then, being in a situation where you're going to report it. Now, the unique thing about this is that you have a lot of people who are at least within the conversation, having the perspective of this. They're going through the same process of elimination that we're going through now. And for some people who never even considered that these would be something anomalous, they're kind of being left with the same options too. They're kind of looking at this like, well, we don't know. We don't really have any other options either when we're talking about what this is. So just wanted to point that out here. Maybe that's something you could show, but when you really wrap your mind around how many times things that were anomalous and didn't make sense have been seen in not just in this country, but imagine if this was a world map. Imagine how many dots on a world map, and this is only in 19 years. They've been keeping this secret, and we've been having this back and forth tug of war with the government on them admitting that anomalous things are out there for 90 years, 80 years, right? So imagine how dark this map would be. That's 19 years. So if it was times 4, just imagine how completely covered this map would be within that time frame. So we're going to go ahead and keep this thing going. I did want to go ahead and take a look at this here. So just some things to keep in mind from previous reporting and things that we've talked about here that really add to the narrative that we're talking about here. So the New Jersey sheriff, who we all know talked about, who ended up seeing 50 objects come in from off the ocean, anywhere from 13 to 30 trailed the Coast Guard boat back to shore, right? We remember that. And then some, actually, let me go ahead and show you something, right? So this is actually something I wanted to show. And let me make sure here before we do this. Yeah, okay. So this is important. So the 50 objects coming in from off the ocean, anywhere from 13 to 30 that trailed the Coast Guard boat back to shore, because we know at this point there's nothing out there in the ocean adversarial that has to do with these things coming in from the ocean, right? We know it's not our military releasing things out in the ocean. We know that. because they've stated that it's neither nor. So we talked about the unknown object that had been detected, that we had a submarine crash into in the South China Sea. That was an unknown object, not a submarine, not a landmass. So we know there's things out there in the ocean. USOs is a really big thing, which would be unidentified submersible or submerged objects. These are essentially UFOs that are in the water. Then they're called USOs once they're in the water. So just pretty recently, George Knapp actually has a show on Netflix, which I can't recall the name of the show, but it's a really good show. You should go watch it. And on this show, it shows what appears to be a transmedium object, which is an object that is able to operate in air and then also seamlessly operate within the water and transition from one to the other, back and forth, right? And he appeared to catch something like that. So when we hear a story like this, where the New Jersey sheriff sees 50 objects coming in from off the ocean, and then anywhere from 13 to 30 that are trailing a Coast Guard boat, there is a thought that these objects come from within the water, that's the origin point for these things that are coming in off the ocean. So they're coming from out of the water, essentially, potentially, likely. And I'm going to show you a video of an example of something that has the ability to do that. So let's take a look. This is the clip from that show. Doesn't have any of the dialogue or anything, but this just shows the object itself. So this is the pure dark blackness of the ocean out here on the California coast. And this object is, which had been moving around their boat all night long. They go to sleep for the night and leave their cameras rolling. The object comes back and they end up capturing this thing going into the water. As you can see the water at the bottom of the screen, you see the boat is rocking a little bit there. And they show this thing going into the water. So just so you know that this does happen out there. And I think that's part of what we want to display as we're putting this puzzle together. So you see it at the surface of the water, now underwater. And it's going to show it a lot closer here in just a moment. Not only that, but there has been reports historically of people who have been out on the ocean. Now, Captain David Fravor, let's start there. The Tic Tac was seen right above the water, and Fravor stated that he saw something underneath the water. The water was frothy. It was kind of roiling, right? And this Tic Tac was above the water, moving around, essentially maybe in communication with whatever it was under the water. He also tells a story about where that a helicopter pilot comes to him one day and talks about how this drone, test drone that they would test, essentially goes out into the ocean, and then they have to go retrieve it with the helicopter, right? They send the guy down on the rope to attach it to the little drone that's in the water, and they go ahead and pull it out the water. And as they're doing this, there was essentially something that they saw from up in the helicopter looking down on the water, saw the shadow of something that was huge coming up to the surface from beneath the diver that was trying to retrieve the drone object. And they kind of got scared and pulled the guy up, right? And then the thing pulled down the drone or the missile. It was a test item. It was either a drone or a missile. And as they pulled the diver up, the thing underwater kind of goes back down and sucks the object down with it, right? So we have things in the water. We have the Aguadilla, Puerto Rico video where the object is going across the base and then seamlessly dives into the water, in and out the water, splits into two, right? So when we have a report of New Jersey sheriff seeing 50 objects coming in off the ocean, and then anywhere from 13 to 30 trailing the Coast Guard boat back to shore, and then on top of this, the government has no clue what this is. I think all these things point to a part of this, what's going on currently, is being related to the phenomena being anomalous. So let's kind of open our eyes to that. And as we continue, police helicopter that positioned itself right above the drone in this current incident, this current time. The New Jersey police helicopter positioned itself above the drone, it said, but felt unsafe and decided to kind of abort. You got to ask yourself why. Maybe one day we'll get to hear from the pilot as to why he felt like that, right? But that's concerning, especially when you put all this, the rest of this together in the puzzle together, and you talk about what it likely means as far as what we are potentially looking at and dealing with. Why would that pilot feel that way? I would love to hear from that pilot. And then objects going dark when approached by police. Now we can talk about something called CE5, which is Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Dr. Stephen Greer created that protocol or came up with the name for it, right? But it's essentially when a person is able to summon or come in contact or get a response from one of these craft up there, right? If you check, there's a lot of videos online where people have laser pointers and they're pointing at these things, and you get a response from the craft. So the craft ends up being aware of the individual. You have the police officer who, within the last few weeks, talked about his encounter that he had with the plasma ball as he was on patrol driving down road at midnight, and this plasma ball, was kind of hovering over his car. Then he went out and got out the car to go ahead and try to film it, and the thing shot across the water instantly, being aware of the individual. So awareness is a big part of this. Again, back to David Fravor with the Tic Tac. He said once he saw the Tic Tac, he looked down and the Tic Tac became aware of him and kind of turned in his direction and then came up as they spiraled around and they met each other, and then things shot off. So there's the awareness portion of this is something to keep in mind also. If these things are somehow aware, and you'll see in some of these other reports that we have here where they say exactly that. A person sits in Minnesota and says, it definitely feels like the object, which is way like a mile away, seems to be aware of what the movements that she makes. So awareness is another part of this, and it's something that we're seeing within this whole thing. So I think it's definitely something we should keep on the table. But all of these things point to these objects potentially being anomalous. And I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. Also, we have USS Russell. And we talked about this on the last show because this was the drone swarm. Jeremy Corbell came out with this story. There was a whole to-do over were these things pyramid and triangle shaped or not? Was it bokeh? I think we spent too much time on that. I think the more important part was there were these objects out there at sea swarming a ship, whether it was triangle, pyramid, or not. there were objects in the middle of the ocean that were swarming Navy ships. These objects, are they likely these same objects that we're dealing with now? Very possible. Very possible. Especially when you look at the behaviors, right? They just swarmed the Coast Guard boat that was coming back to shore. We just talked about it, right? Over on the ocean. So another thing that we have to be, as we're putting this puzzle together to figure out what this is, it's one of the other things we need to remember and put on the list, right? This is another picture. Forget if they're pyramid or not. It's not important. That's not important. The important thing is, what in the world are these things doing out in the middle of the ocean, swarming and hovering for hours and hours, like they're doing right now? All right. So another thing, this was the thing I talked about on the last show that I think is super important, and I think it definitely is still something that we need to kind of focus on, right? Because if once again, if they don't know what these things are, there was the UAP report that it came out, and I read this the other day, and I'm going to read it again, where something along the lines of what we're experiencing was reported in the Arrow report, UAP report. So let me go ahead and go over that. So what are we looking at? Okay, we're going to do the flight safety issues. Okay, I'll just read the whole thing here. So on the 392 FAA reports received during the reporting period, only one report mentioned a possible flight safety issue during the event. In this instance, a commercial air crew reported a near miss with the cylindrical object while over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of New York. Arrow continues into its research into an analysis of that case. Now, UAS observations reported near U.S. nuclear infrastructure, weapons, and launch sites. I think this is important because the behaviors of the UFOs, and I guess they're calling UAPs, have shown interest in nuclear sites and military sites, just like now, these incursions, same exact thing, where people are like, why are they around military bases? Well, we don't know exactly, but they do seem to be around areas where we have nuclear activity. So, and I don't know if they're aware that our military is a military sort of force, and maybe that it's surveillance for them as well, right? We don't know. But this is reported within the Arrow report, and I want to read this to you. I read this to you last show, but I think it's very important that we keep this in mind. Is that I'm gonna read the bullet points here. Actually, I'll read the whole thing. Arrow received a total of 18 reports from the Administrator for Nuclear Safety and the Chairman of Nuclear Regulatory Commission regarding incidents near U.S. nuclear infrastructure, weapons, and launch sites. The Administrator for Nuclear Security and Chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission categorized all of these incidents as UAS, which I pointed out before is what they're calling these things, UAS. And you'll notice a lot of similarities here. Bullet point 1, 10 of the reported UAS flew over protected areas for a duration less than 5 minutes. 2 instances involve longer flight times of 53 minutes and 1 hour and 57 minutes, respectively. Flight duration is unknown for the 6 remaining cases. Bullet point 2, 16 cases involved only 1 UAS, while the remaining 2 cases each reported 2 UAS involved in the event. In one instance, the UAS entered and departed the protected area twice. Bullet point 3, which is the one also to keep note of. On-site security observed UAS in at least half of the UAS cases. On August 3rd, 2023, the DC Cook Nuclear Power Plant security recovered a crashed UAS. Recovered a crashed UAS that was given to Berrien County, Michigan local law enforcement. Arrow has no further information about the crash UAS. So I said last show, and I'll say again, if you want to know what one of these things are, Arrow says that one of the crash objects was given to Berrien County, Michigan local law enforcement. So let's talk about that. Where is that? Who has that? Let's see it, right? Let's see it. So during October 10th to 15th, 2023 is bullet point 4. USPR, formerly known as USPR Babcock and Wilson Nuclear Energy Fuel Cycle Facility in Lynchburg, Virginia, observed UAS flyovers for 6 consecutive nights. Only one UAS system was spotted in each occurrence. There is no data on estimated flight duration for each occurrence. So I think one of the big things is that this is happening, even like there's no instance or time where like we have 6 consecutive nights. We have like 10 nights. We have, you know, sometimes a couple weeks, but not a month. So the activity of whatever these things are doing is escalating at this point to levels that we've never seen before. We've never seen a month's worth of activity go on when it comes in relation to anomalous activity. We just haven't seen it, but it's an obvious escalation but the behaviors are the same. Behaviors are the same, but the escalation is the amount of time that they're there. And you know, the not caring about, you know, being seen is another thing that I'd like to point to as well. But Berrien County, Michigan, we put it on a map. So if anybody is in this area or can get to this area, figure out what law enforcement agency has this UAS, and maybe it's something that you know we can FOIA or we can potentially get to see ourselves. But a crash UAS was retrieved in Michigan in 2023. This is the area. This is Berrien County right here. So what you see on the screen, all these, I guess, towns. So it's stated Berrien County, Michigan, local law enforcement. So you'd have to assume that one of these little towns, the law enforcement within this county has a crashed UAS from a previous incident, an incursion over a nuclear power facility. So let's, if we have super sleuths out there, let's figure out who has it, where it's at, and let's go from there and try to figure that out, because I think, you know, Arrow left the nugget for us in the Arrow report that we're able to use for right now and what's actually going on. So, Berrien County, Michigan, August 3rd, 2023 is when that crash. Local law enforcement agency received the crash UAS. Let's see it. Let's see it. That's where I'm at with it. And here we go. So now we're going to get into examples of some of these things, right? Because I think what most of the things, when I'm looking at the news and I'm looking at the ones that keep showing over and over on the news, you know, they show the one with the fixed wings. It looks like the underbelly of a jet, a jumbo jet. I don't think that, you know, I don't feel like that is anomalous. I feel like that's when I talked about 80% anomalous, 20% man-made. I think that's one of the man-made things that had been put up in response to something anomalous. That's kind of the only thing that makes sense right now. I don't think 100% of everything we're seeing is anomalous, but I'm thinking that potentially what our government is doing is putting up some things to either monitor these anomalous objects, which we'll take a look at in just a moment, these balls of light and these, you know, other things that are also being seen up there. The 40-foot wide by 40-foot wide thing, that isn't anything we're putting up there. That doesn't even make sense. That you know, show me what that is. You know, when we talk about a gentleman that says he saw something as big as a school bus, right? We're not putting anything like that up there. You know, some of these smaller things that we're seeing, maybe those are ones that the military is putting up, but I really feel like, you know, they are doing that in response to these other things that people are seeing, like the things that came off the ocean, the 50 objects. We haven't got real descriptions on what those were, right? So we don't know what category those fall into, but just the behavior coming from the ocean would indicate that it's likely something anomalous, right? So let's go ahead and get into what some of these things look like. So this is like what they saw in Minnesota, right? They're seeing this in Minnesota. Seeing that in Minnesota. And we ran the story, we'll run it again, what it is that they saw. And here we go.
Well, this is an interesting story. People in Northfield keep seeing mysterious lights in the nighttime sky. The sightings come as people on the East Coast report seeing large drones that they can't explain.
The East Coast sightings now have the FBI's attention, with the White House even chiming in. Fox 9's Mike Manzoni spoke with eyewitnesses in Northfield tonight. And Mike, they're not sure what they're looking at.
Yeah, but they say what they're seeing is similar, maybe not the same, but similar to what people are seeing in New York, in New Jersey. Here's one video here where you can kind of see one or two orbs kind of hovering, floating around. At times they move, eventually disappear. What are they? No one knows.
We started trying to follow them, but they won't be followed. They're kind of like they disappear.
Deborah Wagner doesn't know what she keeps seeing over her Northfield home.
And then these things, whenever anybody would kind of come towards them, they'd back off.
But her daughter, Chrissy Grady, sees them too.
Are these UFOs? Are they a government thing? Like, what are they?
It's really low.
I know it is.
You gotta follow it. There's another one up there.
Oh, crap.
Chrissy and her kids took this video when they saw flashing lights that moved away after they spotted them.
Well, it obviously sees me. I gotta pretend like I'm actually driving. Watched both of them. So now there's 4.
They started seeing the lights over the summer, and now it's a nightly thing.
They would come and kind of like hover, and then we would go outside, and then they would leave.
About 1,000 miles away in New York and New Jersey, this is what people are seeing in the skies. Eyewitnesses say they look like SUV-sized drones, and those sightings now have even the White House's attention.
Obviously, this is something that DHS and FBI are tracking very, very closely.
Well, I don't want it to come closer.
As for what Chrissy...
All right, so I'll go ahead and take that out because we played that video before, but I just wanted to show that's anomalous what you're seeing there, and that's happening right now. That Minnesota thing happened the other day, a few days ago, right? So I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing that. Now, here's something that was from 5 years ago. This was from 5 years ago, because what I want to get into is a lot of people who are saying, hey, they have lights on them, so they're not anomalous. Lights don't mean anything. As I said before, lights are something that's universal. Lights are found from this end to the universe to the other end of the universe. So when we talk about that, we can't, that just because something has lights, you can't rule that out. I wanted to show you this, which is an example of that fact. So 5 years ago, totally not related to this current flap, or if you want to call it that, or incident. This was an object from 5 years ago.
Cole Miller talked to the local man who says he saw something out there.
Out here it's quiet anyway, and the stars come alive. And it was literally right up there. Not the trees, but way up in the sky.
Sitting on that tailgate, staring up into the dark night.
Whoa! There it goes, look at it. See?
Oh my God,
Look what it's doing now.
A sight one family won't soon forget.
What is that?
I was in bed. My wife came home, and she was putting some groceries away, and she come running in. Come out, husband, you got to see this. There's something in the sky, and I can't explain it.
At their Gaston home,
I think it was January 11th.
David Stone takes us through that strange encounter.
And it was a spinning, colorful light. And it wasn't too far away, but yet it wasn't right here. You know, it was like What could it be?
Is it coming closer to us?
No.
Yes, it is.
This shaky cell phone video showing those dancing lights.
It would spin and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it would just poof, just go away for like, I don't know, a quarter mile, half mile, just gone, and then come right back. Got us all fired up. Huh, little buddy?
I was inside looking from the window.
Sharing it on social media, his wife began to see some feedback. That's when Tom Bowden at MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, started his investigation, looking into things like air traffic patterns as well as astronomy, eventually concluding whatever that flashing orb was an unidentified flying object.
Nobody could say one way or the other what it was.
You said you're a skeptic. Are you still a skeptic?
I am. You know, it was just bizarre.
Do you believe there's other beings out there in the space world?
I don't know. God he created the heaven and the earth, so I guess there's more to it than that.
Down here, we may never know everything going on up there. In the meantime, we'll continue to gaze at the skies and wonder, are we alone? Or are we in the cosmic company of something much bigger?
It'd be nice to have an explanation.
So there you go. 5 years ago, over 5 years ago, that story fits right into today. The descriptions, it was there, then it shot over there. These are the things that are happening here, and we're getting those reports within all the things that we're seeing now. As you saw, the lady in Minnesota reporting the same sort of thing. This is happening within this current cluster of events that we're looking at. So I think, once again, going back, one of the things that we gotta do is we have to make sure that we're looking at Sky Map and Flight Tracker to make sure that the objects that you are seeing and then are about to report as being part of this thing, you want to make sure that they are not planes. Let's do that as number one. Make sure that the objects you're seeing are not explainable as planes and are listed on the flight tracker. Step one. Step two, if you're seeing something in the sky, it looks like a star or it's a point of light and it seems like it's moving, pull out your phone and use the sky map. Takes 1 second. Make sure it's not a planet or a star. And then boom, then at least we have that. At least you can say you've taken those steps to verify that it didn't list there. And so it means now it definitely is something that probably shouldn't be up there, because if it's a commercial pilot or a private pilot, they should be broadcasting their call sign. And then we know at least what bucket to put that in. But yeah, we're going to have to start doing that going forward, because we only have, this keeps happening every day, and we have the time to learn from our mistakes and, collect the data without all the extra noise involved with it. So I think with that being said, what do we have here? I did have something from 1962, and this is when we were talking about lights, and then just the commonality of what's going on now that's been going on forever. 1962 is 63 years ago, and I'm going to show you something where this could be reported today as well. It's like a 39-second clip, so check this out.
Do you indeed think that there is life on other planets? Tell me, do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
No, he seems definite. You seem
Definitely.
definite. How do you see this life and where?
Oh, I've seen a flying saucer.
You've seen one?
Yes,
Where was
definitely.
this?
At Lane Cove.
When was this?
1953.
You don't think this was a figment of your imagination?
Several other people with me saw it.
You all had the same figment. What did it look like?
It was standing up there, still,
Just suspended in space?
with colours coming out of it.
Flat or on its side?
It was around.
And you think this was sent from another planet, do you?
I really do. Well, where else would it come from?
How many more reports do we have to go through and take in that describe the exact same thing before we get to a point to where we just have the acknowledgement? I think that's where we're at when we talk to the government, when we talk about what the government stance is on this and why they won't go all the way in to say more about what's going on, because I think the only thing that they could say would be what this is and that it isn't something from here. And they just don't want to take that step to do so. They don't want to take the extra step because that would be disclosure, right? That would be the beginning of disclosure and also the beginning of having to tell everything else that has happened along with this process, right? As far as the long laundry list of things that they may have done or been involved with in order to keep the secret a secret, right? So we're at that moment, and we're just seeing a government being reluctant in taking a step that they should take. So with that being said, I'm hoping, you know, we have Donald Trump is coming in office. He's acting like he's gonna say something about it. I would hope that he does. I would hope that they would do it now. Truthfully, I hope that the government and just right now that it's up. I mean, everybody sees what's going on. It's not hidden any longer. We all see it. It's all in front of the world. Whatever this activity is keeps happening every day. So whoever's behind it obviously doesn't care about, you know, you wanting to keep this stuff secret. They don't care. They're doing it every single day. And what is this a point where they're going to do it every single day until you say something? And as long as you don't say something, they're just going to continue to do it every day. It seems that way. It seems we're a month in. 1 month today makes 1 full month of this activity, even though we know as far as anomalous activity goes, it's been going on for millennia, right? But for whatever reason, in this moment, it's taking a world stage. It's being done in front of the faces of all at one time. And like I said, I'm still going to be 80-20 on this, 90-10, but there's just too many things that we've talked about in the current situation that leaves us with nothing else but the extraterrestrial option. And if that's what this is, then you have to be ready for what comes next. Now, what comes next, we don't really know. That's kind of where we're at and why we have the conversations that we have, because we don't know what's really next. You know, if this is a moment where we're experiencing, you know, a coming out of these beings, and you know, this is going to be the new normal, then this is going to be different. It's going to be different. But it's too early to say. I mean, it's not really, because I think we have enough evidence. Like if this was court, if we were in court and we presented this case the way we did today, and we had all this evidence, and even though some of it's circumstantial, there is a lot of things that line up with historical things. I think if we presented this case in court, it would be strong enough to get a conviction. I really do. And you know, I think the way we've laid it out, at least I think we made sense out of what is currently happening based on the information that we have, and even the latest information that they've come out with, you know, after the meeting that they had yesterday. I think yesterday's meeting really, when the gentleman spoke earlier, he confirmed at the very least that they had given their reasons within that meeting on why it wasn't us and why it wasn't adversarial. And I think they were able to at least drive that point home for them. So it's time to start having the other conversation. And in as far as news outlets, maybe this needs to be the line of questioning going forward, you know, because I've always said, if we're talking about drones is a simple term, right? It's just an unmanned craft. It's an unmanned craft. So we know, based on some of these anomalous encounters, that we've seen objects orbs, spheres, different things that we know are not manned, but we also know are not from here. So when we say drones, there's a fine line between drones from Earth and drones that are not from Earth. But I think they both could be considered unmanned vehicles, right? So when the government talks about drones, do they use drones in that same mindset with extraterrestrial drones being considered drones and then man-made drones being drones, but saying the word drones, right? You can kind of talk between the lines when you do that. It's something to think about. Definitely something to think about. So with that being said, I think we are pretty much at the end here. Now, this guy, this is one of the reasons why and kind of got my antenna up, the guy you see on screen here, because he had a bus-sized drone in Mount Clair, New Jersey. He said it was 40 feet by 40 feet. He said he saw it about 150 feet off the ground, right? I mean, we're having reports like this. This is his actual video from it that you're looking at on screen, where he said this object, when it was close to the ground, 150 feet off the ground, that it was 40 feet by 40 feet, the size of a 2-car garage. Guys, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? What are we seeing here? Government, it's in your court. The ball is in your court. What you decide to do with it is going to determine, I think, how humanity and how your citizens locally feel about you once we get to the point to where this has been confirmed. So whether the activity has to escalate to a point to where, they're not just hanging out in the sky, now they're landing, because we know they land. We have way many cases where they do land. So does it have to get to the point to where the things that are showing up in the sky every day begin to land in neighborhoods all over the country? Because we know what happens after they land. After they land, they come out of their craft, right? So if this is what's happening here, I think you probably should say what's going on before what's already seems to be out of your control gets even more out of control, right? And I think that you need to think about that when you go into these meetings and you have these talks behind closed doors. You guys need to be talking about, the effects of disclosing versus not disclosing in a moment where something else may disclose for you, and what those impacts might be. I think it's something that you guys should be talking about and considering in those meetings. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. So with that being said, we are still on drone watch. Are some of these drones not from Earth? Very likely. Very, very likely. We will continue to cover this as things go on. Obviously, we're not going to be rushing to judgment here. If something comes up like another classified meeting, or we're going to allow that to take place before jumping out and making a statement or attempting to analyze. So we're gonna see what happens here. And I think with this being like the third or fourth classified meeting within the last week, I want to say, and the conversations that are being had aren't really progressing as far as the amount of information they're giving during these meetings. I think we're getting to a point to where something has to give, and so we'll be waiting to see what happens there as we go into this holiday season. I'm hoping everybody is able to kind of forget about these drones. I know wherever they're flying at, that's probably not going to be the case, but for the most part, try to enjoy this holiday season. I'm going to try to do the same. This may be the last show until I come back from holiday, unless something happens that really changes the whole perspective, because I think where we're at right now, we're at a point to where we could say with 80%, 90% certainty that we're dealing with something that doesn't likely come from this planet. And you know, I think the only other bigger thing than figuring that out is either having a moment where one of these things lands and we get to just sit there and look at it, or the government comes out and says, yeah, that's what this is, or, you know, it does something crazy in the sky, or the government attempts to bring one down. I think those are the only things right there that could happen within the next week that would make us have to come back and do a show. Otherwise, I think we could probably chill out through the holiday season and kind of just come back and reconvene and see where we're at. With that being said, I think we've been running about an hour and a half. So we can open up the phone lines if you would like. If you have something to say, let me go ahead and make sure we're set up. And we're set up for that. Please, no trolling, no trolls. If you're trolling, I'll immediately have to cut you off, like immediately. So don't come in with the troll stuff. And if you have something really considerate or serious to say in regards to this, then we'll go ahead and do that. But considerate or serious to say in regards. Okay, that's feedback, obviously. All right, phone line is open. So if you have something you want to come in and say, we'll give it a couple of minutes here as I go ahead and otherwise get ready to wrap the show up for this evening. And we'll put the number up here so you know what number to call, right? Got to do that. If you want to call, the number here is 856-843-3444, or that's 856 the DIGG. Outside the United States, you can dial 001-856-843-3444, 856 the DIGG, and we'll give it a couple minutes. Otherwise, I do want to tell you, you definitely you're watching this show from the Social Dig, which is youtube.com/@MrRobG. So if you have not subscribed over here on my channel, I would appreciate that you do. Come on over, hit that sub button. We always have awesome stuff going on, and obviously we're simultaneously broadcasting this on to our Spaced Out Radio channel, where we do the after hour show, and we do Dave Scott Runs the Woo Train Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. midnight to midnight, Monday through Friday. I'm on Saturday, Sundays, 8 p.m. Until 11 p.m. Then we have Jackson Lee. They run Element 115 on Fridays from 8 to 9. So a lot of good stuff going on in Spaced Out Radio. So if you're watching on the Social Dig, go over to Spaced Out Radio, hit subscribe. If you're watching on Spaced Out Radio, come on over to the Social Dig, hit the subscribe. It's all a family thing and a lot of great content. And I don't see anybody calling in, so we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap this show up tonight. Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming on in and checking out the show. This has been the definitive UFO news show with Mr. Rob G. I hope I helped get everything straight. If you missed last episode, go back and watch that. I think, we take it from the beginning and really bring it up to speed. And then today's episode, I think, is the cherry on top. And we'll continue to cover UFO news going forward. My name is Mr. Rob G. Once again, this is the definitive UFO news show. You guys enjoy the rest of your night and your holiday. Have a great new year. If I don't see you till then, you guys take care.